105.9 Academy FM.
The sound of Folkestone.
My name's Orin. I'm a student at the Folkestone Academy, and I'm here at Port Lympne to talk to Richard Barnes about wolves.
Okay, well, in this enclosure you can see three of our wolves. These are three brothers. They're two different ages. They're old men now. The youngest one is 12 going on 13 this year, and the older boys, they are nearly 15, so they're getting on a bit. And today, as you can see, it's pretty cold and snowy, but doesn't bother these guys at all. They're built for it. They're Canadian timber wolves, so they're kind of built for living in climates that are far colder than this, so they're not bothered at all. They're just trotting around the paddock. They're just thinking we're all a bit crazy because we're all, wearing these thick jackets and hats.
Do wolves being born in captivity change their behaviour?
Yeah, behaviour is very different for captive and wild animals alike. Obviously, they maintain certain characteristics which they need in order to be a pack animal, but they obviously don't hunt like they would in the wild. We don't feed them live food in an artificial environment. We do try to keep their prey as natural as possible, so we always leave the fur on it and the bones in so they can really get tucked into it. And where they're pack animals, we give them bigger pieces of food so they can all share. This is where they get to sort out who's who within the pack, and this is where it all kicks off really. And if one's kind of lower down and he tries to get in where the higher ranking animal is eating, then he'll get chased off. Sometimes he'll get attacked, and this is all quite normal sort of wolf behaviour. What they also don't do, which we can't offer them in captivity, is we can't offer them vast expanses of land, hundreds and hundreds of square miles to run around. And so although they will have a territory within here the same as they would in the wild, it's obviously a lot smaller, and it's maintained by the fence line that we have for them rather than their kind of natural range.
How old is your youngest wolf?
Well, the youngest wolf in this enclosure is he's nearly 13 years old, so he's not a youngster by any means, but they do very well. They don't have many health problems, so even though he's quite old and the other ones are even older, we don't have to do much work on them veterinary wise. They're pretty healthy most of the time.
What do they look like when they are born?
When they're born, they look very similar to domestic dogs. Obviously, the wolf is the ancestor for all domestic dogs, and so they look very similar. Normally very dark black or dark brown kind of coloration, and they kind of get their adult coats a little bit later, and they certainly don't look like this colour when they're born. This is what old man wolves look like when they've gone sort of the whitish grey colour. So typically they're very small. They're eyes are still closed when they're first born. Give or take, it's about the same kind of time as when a domestic dog pup would open its eyes, so about 10 days or so. They'll be curled up in little tiny balls with the rest of their brothers and sisters, literally just the same as when a domestic dog has babies in her basket. She'll keep them very close under her legs, very close to her, and wolf mothers are very much the same. They don't like anyone coming near them, and it's not until the cubs are about maybe 4 weeks of age that the mum will start letting other members of the pack kind of interact with them, and that's kind of when they start venturing out and start acting like wolves rather than just like little pups.
How many wolves here were born here?
All of the wolves that you see here in front of us, these three, they were all born here. They were certainly the 12-year-old male. He was the last of the timber wolves that were born here at the park, and we haven't had any wolf cubs born at Port Lympne now for nearly 13 years, so it's been a long time. These are the last kind of timber wolves we are going to keep. We'll soon be replacing this type of grey wolf with another type of grey wolf, and these guys have done. We'll replace them with one of the rarer subspecies that's really sort of needed for conservation value. So there are certain European grey wolves which are really endangered now and are really struggling in their wild range. So the idea would be that we'll get some of those in and try and use those to exhibit and to breed, and one day hopefully help the numbers boost in the wild.
Which dog breeds are they closest to?
Okay, well, they are the common ancestor for all domestic dogs. So, I mean, there are certain dog species, if you like, the domestic dog species, which look very similar to them. Things like German Shepherds and Huskies and things like that obviously have quite a lot of the feature that the wolf have, but nothing's quite like a wolf. Certainly, although they maintain certain elements of pack kind of behaviour, and so your dog will miss you when you go out because it thinks of itself as one of you. It doesn't generally howl for another sort of dog or wolf to kind of be near it, but it likes the company of others. So because they're humanised, they like the company of others. But yeah, the wolves, as you can see, they're quite different looking. They're quite wild looking, and I think that's what makes them interesting to everyone, is because they're like dogs, but they're just the wild version.
Why are they known as an aggressive creature?
Okay, well, they are. Unfortunately, you're right. People do get the wrong impression about wolves, and for many, many years, we certainly try to dispel the myths of wolves being ferocious and aggressive, because they really are not. In reality, there hasn't been a fatal wolf attack for over 350 years over the world, and so they rarely will attack humans. Generally, if they see humans or anything to do with humans, cars, houses, whatever, they'll run away from that. Unfortunately, in a lot of the places where wolves exist, the people are probably the least educated in some of these places, so they think that the wolves are going to come in and attack their children, their animals, and sure, wolves aren't stupid by nature. They know they have to catch their own food, so wherever there are people living and they've got animals, if they don't keep those livestock animals correctly, the wolves are going to know to come in and maybe take one out, because it's far easier for them to take a livestock animal than it is to hunt something that instinctively knows it has to run away from the wolf pack. We try to say that they're not aggressive, they're not ferocious, because we work with them every day. We see characters in them which are very much not ferocious and not aggressive. Never to be underestimated. We always have to make sure when we're in there that we know where the wolves are. We don't go and take a sleep in one of their dens or anything like that, because there could be a problem. So we make sure we're very sensible about how we work with them. And yeah, I think as long as you're careful and as long as you know the animals, you can treat them with respect, but you don't have to be scared of them. Certainly when the children come into the zoo and we educate the children, the visitors, and we're trying to change their minds so they don't think of the wolves as the big bad wolf from the storybooks, but actually they have a bit of respect, but they actually enjoy what the wolf is as an animal.
Do you go in the enclosure with the wolves when they're in there, or do you close them up to go in?
Okay, we do have the ability to close them off if we need to, but we go in there. We don't consider them a particularly dangerous species. It's very few and far between on occasions where wolves attack keepers in any zoo across the world, and so we find that as long as we're working them sensibly and we know where they are, we feel quite safe to be in there. The times when it may get a little bit more dangerous for us would be when we're putting food in there and there's a big pack of them, or when it's their mating or breeding season, or they may have youngsters. That might be a time when we have to be extra cautious, but we'll always make sure that there's more than one keeper in there at any one time to make sure that we're knowing what's going on and we're keeping an eye on any aggression.
How long does the mother stay with the young?
Okay, well, being a pack animal, the mother, generally, the mother to young is the only breeding female within the pack. So it's mum and dad, and then all of the rest of the pack is made up of different ages of their offspring, okay? So mum will be the only breeding female. Therefore, sometimes the cubs will remain with their mum for many years. The breeding behaviour of other females in that pack is suppressed by the hormone of the alpha female being so dominant, and that means that the daughters won't cycle into estrus, which means they won't have breeding cycles, and the males will just kind of sit in place where they're told to, and they'll all help raise the youngsters. So they'll all help bring up any cubs that are born into that pack. Generally, males are better than females at doing this. Mums are obviously really good for their cubs, but generally older brothers and sisters, brothers make better carers than sisters. Sisters generally get to a point where they want to leave the pack and they want to go and start their own family, whereas males, they're quite happy to never leave mum and dad, so that they can stay there and be looked after and help look after future generations for forever sometimes.
How do they live in a pack?
Okay, well, living in a pack is what makes them really, really efficient at hunting, at surviving, at living, because they're relying on each other to kind of look after each other, much the same as we are when we're in family units. We have mum, dad and brothers and sisters, cousins. It's all to kind of help each other out and look out for each other. Also, obviously an animal like the wolf that has to hunt, if it's just one wolf running after food and that animal sort of gets away from the wolf, he goes hungry that day. But if there's many wolves chasing an animal, they can sort of surround it and they can chase it, and if one gets a bit tired, he'll drop to the back and another one will take over the lead and they'll keep chasing the animal. And once they actually get to an animal, so imagine their prey being something like a caribou that we know as reindeer, or I don't know, a bison or something like that, a big animal that's very big, very powerful. One wolf on its own will struggle to take that animal down, so what they do is they all pile on and they all try to work together to bring the animal down, and once it's down and it's subdued, they'll kill it together. And so that is one really major benefit of living in a pack. But also they come from, like we said, a very cold place that they live. You know, these ones come from Canada, which is a lot colder than here. So if you've got, I don't know, 9 or 10 wolves living in your family and you all live in a burrow under the ground, that's where you sleep, but you haven't got any central heating, you haven't got a fire to chuck logs on, so you all sit together, keep each other warm by all wrapping around each other and staying nice and snug. So that's the other major benefit of living in a kind of pack, that you keep each other warm, you keep each other sort of going, and you also motivate each other. So if it's really tough, there's no water, there's no food, anything like that to find, then you'll keep motivating each other to keep moving on and keep going. And so I think that's a major thing that the pack animals have, which singular animals don't kind of get and they can't rely on. So
how do they decide who's leader and who's not?
Okay, that's a really good question. The way they form kind of packs and the way they choose who's going to be dominant and who's going to be subordinate is all down to their characters. So as with people, some of us are quite loud, some of us are quite quiet, some of us are quite feisty, some of us are quite timid, and it's much the same with wolves or dogs or lions, tigers, anything. They all have to be a certain kind of animal, a certain kind of character, to get to that dominance position. So we may have a pack of wolves that live their whole life pretty much the same, and there's always the dominant pair, and it's and everyone just fits in where they're meant to. No one gets aggressive with the alpha pair, no one steps out of line, and no one fights for dominance. Then the alpha pair, something will happen, mum or dad will die, and then what tends to happen is someone from younger generations will then want to take over. So say the dad dies and he has a load of sons that were living with him, then they'll start feeling that they want to be a leader, so they'll start trying to tell the other wolves what to do. So they'll become almost the father figure, and this is when there can be some problems within the pack environment, because they have to sort out who's who and who's dominant. Generally, the alpha pair, if one of them dies, it's a funny thing, but quite often the other one will die as well. So they rely so heavily on each other that if one goes, the other one will go, and then the pack will generally disband, and they'll find themselves in other sort of pack situations elsewhere with opposite sexes from a different kind of bloodline, so not their brothers or not their sisters. But yeah, it's not in every single animal to become a dominant animal. Some of them, they just don't like that idea of being in charge. They just want to do whatever they're told, which is good because they can just eat with the others and they don't have to hunt as, they can be lazy. And whereas if you're a leader, you have to be a really good leader, and you have to make sure that everything you do is in the is for all the others within that pack. So not all of them can do it.
Are there any wild wolves around here?
There are no wolves in the UK. There hasn't been wolves here for a few hundred years now. There has been talk of bringing wolves back to Scotland. Certainly that would be the UK. Unfortunately, as we've already sort of spoke about, the perception of wolves being these kind of dangerous killers that everyone's worried about taking their children from the garden is a big thing, and it's a big issue for us. There are several reports quite regularly of incidents involving foxes, which are obviously quite small carnivores in comparison to the wolves. So if you imagine how much that will be hammed up and amplified when we have a wolf running around the countryside, it's going to be a long time away, I think, from finally happening, if it does happen. obviously I work with these guys every day, so for me, I'd like nothing more than to know that we've got wolves running around in the countryside out there. And if you like wolves, I'm sure you'll feel the same. But I think it's a long way off. But they live quite happily in Europe, in several places. As long as there are less people and there is bigger open ranges of land, mountains, forests, that kind of thing, then the wolves will do very well. And if you give them a chance and you don't hunt them, their numbers will steadily increase very, very well. So yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 really. We need to leave them alone so they do well, but we can't leave them alone because they start interfering with us when they come into contact with our livestock and stuff. So it's a bit of an issue really. But yeah, there is certainly none in England that we know of.
It's just wondering, how do you get a job to work with wolves?
Okay, well, becoming a keeper, working with any type of animal is very difficult. You have to be very, very dedicated. As you can see, we have to work in all weathers. We don't get to sit in a nice warm office. It's pretty cold today, and you have to just kind of deal with it. The animals don't go, right, okay, the weather's bad, we'll just stay in, you don't have to look after us for a few days. They need looking after every day, so you have to make sure they've got water every day, food every day, they're all cleaned out and got nice, sleeping quarters. So it's tough. The best way to go about doing it is to when you're kind of at an age where you are able to volunteer in your local park, then kind of start working with the animals on a kind of weekend basis. What I had to do, and what a lot of keepers do, is you give up your free time. Instead of going out and sort of doing stuff with your mates, you kind of come to the zoo on the weekend and you sweep paths and you help build fences and that kind of stuff. And then if you're really, really lucky, you'll get a chance to be taken on as a keeper. That's kind of how I started, and 16 years later I'm still a zookeeper. So I mean, I wouldn't do anything else, and I don't mind the bad weather. It gets a bit cold sometimes, but the nice bits outweigh the bad bits. But it's tough, and you've got to give your whole life to being a keeper if that's what you want to do.
Thanks for standing out here in the cold and answering my questions about the wolves.
That's fine. I hope you've kind of got a little bit from what I've said, and you've taken that on board, and hopefully that'll help you kind of make up your mind if later on you want to kind of do something with wolves.
Academy FM Folkestone
on 105.9 FM
and online at academyfmfolkstone.com.